Welcome. My guests today are Major General Sean Bratton, the commander of the Space Training and Readiness Command for the U.S. Space Force, and Chief Master Sergeant James Tobias, the senior enlisted leader of the Space Training and Readiness Command for also the U.S. Space Force. General Bratton and Chief Tobias, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
What we're talking about today is not just the Space Readiness and Training Command, but really how are your plans to train Guardians? How's that evolving? It's in many ways it's very new, but in some ways the Air Force has been training folks in this world of space for quite a while. So let me start at the beginning there. The Space Readiness and Training Command's overarching plan, goals, to train Guardians. Major General, can you lead us off and let us know some of those high-level goals?
Yeah, Jason, thanks. It's a great question. We talk about it every day. It's been about a year since we stood up Space Training and Readiness Command, or what we call Starcom. Definitely has the coolest name of anything in the Space Force. And Chief and I were working it before the stand-up, even all through last spring and summer of 21. But the mission of Starcom really boils down to preparing Guardians. Prepare the Guardians of the Space Force for competition and conflict. Should we be called upon to do that? And so we think about how do we train, how do we educate, how do we test new hardware, new capabilities, all sort of falls within Starcom's mission. But the key to that mission absolutely is the Guardians, the people that we are training, and what are the things we need to do as a new service, as we bring members in just right off the street as brand new accessions into the military, but also members of the Army and Navy and Air Force and Marine Corps that are transferring into the Space Force. How do we take what they already know and just better prepare them for competition and conflict? That's really what the challenge ahead of us, the thing we think about every day that keeps us coming to work.
What's interesting about that, how you described it, was you're dealing with two separate things here. You have new people, as you said, folks coming off the street, and then you have folks from the different services who are bringing some knowledge base. How do you meet both of those needs without, either A, starting at a too high of a level for some folks, or B, starting at too low of a level for other folks?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll talk just for a minute, and then Chief will drop some wisdom on us. The folks coming in from the other services bring a ton of experience, and that's important for a couple of reasons. Certainly for culture and identity. We're not just the Air Force, although many Guardians came from the Air Force, but probably an equal number are divvied up from the other services and from former civilians that just came right into the Space Force without having been part of a new organization. So like you point out, there's different needs there. For the folks coming in from the other services, we look at their record, their experience, we talk to them, and then they get to essentially skip ahead in training, in some cases all the way ahead. And so we don't put them through stuff that they already know how to do. We don't want to waste their time in that way, waste our resources. But really what we want is to get them right onto the operations floor, into their job, so they can help us figure out all these kind of tough problems that are ahead of the Space Force. Chief, what would you add?
Yes, sir. I would add for the new accessions coming in off the street. We are being very selective in who actually makes the cut to come be a part of the Space Force, and because of that, no different with the ISTs. We're looking for specific skill sets and backgrounds. We're looking for a set of soft skills and experiences, and so from a training and readiness perspective, we feel that based on that criteria, the training and experiences that we're setting up is probably even matched to the folks that we're bringing in. That swath of folks coming in is probably not as wide as in some of the other services in terms of the different skill sets and experiences. And so our training is shaped to get after both the inter-service transfers and the new accessions in that way.
I love the fact you mentioned soft skills. There's so often people don't talk about what those soft skills are. It's always the harder skills. Maybe just give me a sense of how those soft skills fit into those bigger priorities around training and education.
Yeah, so the way the soft skills fit in across the board is I mean, they're not just part of the training and development. They're also rooted into our core values, our 4 Cs. You know, it's we don't want just someone who can push a button. We also want someone who can think critically and creatively and bring their own personal experience and their own personal opinions and their talents to each level of the battlefield, so to speak. And so throughout their training experience, we're going to get to a point to where, you know, from basic training through, whether that's, you know, basic training for the enlisted or OTS for the officers, we're going to embed that in, you know, at that stage. We'll also follow up with, you know, at initial skills training or what we call tech school, kind of interweaving that back into not just the training, but, you know, also, you know, into what it means to be a guardian. And so you know, the end state is that we hope that we get to a point to where these soft skills just become the skills that a guardian has.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about, you know, all these missions, everything we do, true in almost every organization, I think, are done by teams. And so, you know, you can be real smart, but you got to be effective as part of the team. You got to be able to connect with your team members, contribute, you know, be a leader, be a follower, all those things. That's absolutely required for us in the Space Force.
In many ways, that's what all training in DoD across all the military services and defense agencies really focus on, is that being an effective leader, being an effective follower, understanding your role. So let's maybe talk a little bit about those priorities. What are you hoping is when it comes to training and education? What are you trying to do over the next 6 or 9 months? And even talk about, you know, the plans to create and evolve your testing range and some of those other initiatives that come underneath those priorities.
Yeah, Jason, it was great as we, you know, we're finishing up our first year and our birthday's coming up later in August. Our priorities for the first year, we had a couple very clear kind of go-dos from General Raymond. One of which was establish independent professional military education for the Space Force by 2023 is what's written in the capstone document. And so we, you know, out of the gate, even before our establishment, we knew we had to deliver that, not just because General Raymond said so, but because the Space Force needs to educate the force. As a new service, it's a responsibility we have. So we've been working hard on that in year one, and I think you'll see, we'll see that start to begin delivered in our second year to align with the deadline that General Raymond gave us. But also right out of the gate, we really started working on what is our vision for training? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? And then what's the roadmap that's going to get us there? That document, the planning team has been working on. We think we have it well codified, and we're about to publish that. It really articulates this vision, sort of like we already started to talk about on bringing together the soft skills with what the Space Force needs for mission, and then walking that through, you know, whether you're a civilian coming off the street or coming in from another service, walking through from the, you know, most basic training to the most advanced, how we see that across a career and delivering the right training at the right time for our guardians. The kind of third area, in addition to training and education, and you mentioned it, that was a priority and maybe our most difficult technical challenge, was the build out of a training and testing range or complex. We put a big label on it, called it the National Space Test and Training Complex. At the Pentagon, sometimes they talk about it as operational test and training infrastructure, but it's really the kind of, hey, what's the gym and the tools you need in the gym for the force to go work out and get stronger and better, and work on things like teamwork and integration of capabilities. And so, you know, the build out of that range complex that we talk about, we put a lot of time and energy on that in our first year. And I think we're beginning to deliver some capabilities, but we're going to maintain focus on that for our second year for certain.
So to go backward for a second, because you got my reporter antenna up a little bit when you talk about the roadmap, and we're almost ready to release that. So first I'll have to ask you the obvious question. Do you want to give us any kind of preview of it? I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think for the training vision and roadmap document, you know, I think that will be available in the near future. And by that, I mean within the next couple of months, but it really articulates that, where are we trying to get to as an end state? How do we think about intelligence and cyber operations and space operations and training, and really the integration of those together? It comes back to that teamwork piece of I can't just train an intel operator separate from a cyber operator, separate from a space operator, and acquirers and engineers. Really, I need to train them collaboratively. So I think you'll see us emphasize integration and training on what are opportunities to bring those communities together. And because the Space Force is so small, I think there's a lot of opportunity to do things different in that way. Mainly our scale allows us to do that. So we're excited about it.
I think that's a great point that people maybe don't realize is roughly what's the size of the Space Force these days. And when you say, and because you almost are starting, not quite a blank sheet of paper, but you have this really great opportunity to really rethink how you deliver training. So I know there's two questions in there, maybe the size of the Space Force roughly.
Yeah, today I don't have the exact number, but we're right around 16,000. I think our end strength goal for this fiscal year is 8,400. Chief's nodding, so that gives me confidence that I got the number right. But yeah, 8,400. But we don't get a lot bigger than that. You know, we grow to be about 18,000. It'll always be about half civilian employees and half military uniform members. And then, of course, we're supported by industry and a contractor force that keeps us going every day.
Well, I appreciate the fact you said that the roadmap and vision will be out in the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll make it public where we can also find that and make sure folks can get a look at that as well. On the training range, maybe add a little more detail around that too, because I think when people think of range, they think of, oh, I go someplace and I take advantage of the technology or whatever it is. This is more of a concept, or is it actually, you know, I'll call it a schoolhouse, right? It's a place you go and you get hands-on technology, hands-on equipment, hands-on training. Give me a sense.
Yeah, I'll start and then and I'll hand it over to the chief. But it's a very different thing, and it took us a while to wrap our arms around it. But you know, when you think of like air, land, or sea, there's places, you know, in the United States where we have carved out. There's places in the United States where we have carved out a piece of real estate essentially, and we use that for training. Southern Nevada for the Air Force, the National Training Center in California that the Army uses, you know, areas where the Navy does testing, all in a very physical sense of we own this real estate. We're gonna test and train here. Well, you can't do that in low Earth orbit. There's no sovereignty claims to be made to an area of space, and so we think about it much more in if we want to do a test activity on orbit. How do we do that safely? How do we notify the right folks so people understand what we're doing, that we're operating within agreed upon norms of behavior? And so a lot of it is behavioral aspects, but for the physical nature of the range, the things that you need, we need to be able to observe the activity. We need to be able to command and control the spacecraft. And so a lot of it is ground infrastructure that supports on-orbit activities that comes into play. Chief, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, right? You know, our domain is so different, right? It's not like any of our guardians, at least for now, maybe in the future someday, will ever be able to go up into space and actually see, you know, the things that are happening, you know, from the other end of what they do here on the planet, on the Earth, excuse me. You know, and one of our challenges there is not just, you know, enabling the tech to be able to do it, but be able to create an environment to where they know can understand and understand the impact of the decisions they make, the analysis they do, the work they perform, to actually see it. Because inherently, when you see some of that and when you go through some of the actual experience, that's honestly where you build your culture. Right, you understand the mission a little better when you actually get to go do something. And so the range is meant to do just that, to provide that, albeit virtual, but to give them that live experience of what it's like to actually do their mission and to work through failure and challenges and lessons learned and get after those things so that they can be prepared and ready to go should and when, if that time comes.
Well, Chief, you brought up the word culture. We're going to get to that in our next segment. First, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion, Modern Government, Space Training and Readiness Command, sponsored by KPMG on Federal News Network.